Okay, and we are live. Welcome back, everyone. Hey, just want to thank everyone for tuning in. I apologize if my change of time during the week has confused anyone. My personal life got in the way for Monday nights, and so I have moved it to Thursday nights, at least from here on out until something else comes up. So just be aware that if you were used to finding these videos coming up on Monday or Tuesday, they are now going to be moving to Thursday nights, henceforth moving forward. So with that, was going to dive in. My intention tonight was to recap a lot of the cool announcements from Microsoft Ignite, their I'll call it half-year conference. There you've got Microsoft Build and Microsoft Ignite, which are the two big Microsoft conferences where all kinds of cool, awesome new stuff gets announced, and you get to see sort of what the future looks like for Microsoft development and what that means going forward. Ignite tends to be very developer focused, and all kinds of stuff for, I think they refer to as IT professionals typically. So there is a whole lot of announcements and things that have come out. I'm going to give a couple of highlights and then skip over a lot of it. I made the mistake of not realizing the sheer magnitude of how much stuff there was going to be. So it's going to be sort of a quick rapid fire draw of stuff that I think is cool, and then pointing out other things for if people want to go dive deeper. I also wanted to say that if there's ever any of these topics that sound interesting to people, leave me a message in the comments. I'm happy to go through and do like a deep dive, or even just watch me struggle through it one night and see what we can learn. I'm always happy to do that and dive in and see what there is. So there's just so much there. It's always hard to know kind of what to start, and so usually I wait until I have something that looks like a good fit, or some project where I can use it as an excuse to learn something new, and then dive into it. So with that said, let's start checking out some of this Ignite stuff. I gotta move some stuff around here real quick, because unfortunately this was a very busy day for me. Okay, so for those people who are interested, I've got short links for all this stuff. So let's flip this over to that view there. So the key place to start for anyone who's interested is just right on the Microsoft Ignite page. This kind of gives you the overview. The keynotes, especially the day one keynotes, I always find very fascinating to watch. They usually kind of set the tone for the rest of the day of what you can expect to hear from most of the bigger name sessions. All of these on-demand ones are sort of like the big center stage type presentations. But there are a significant number of other sessions, which we'll get to in a minute. So definitely recommend watching the keynote. There's just a lot of really cool stuff in there. A lot of it tends to center around Azure and all of the latest new offerings there. Specifically, and I'll drop another link to this in here, on Azure, a lot of the big highlights come with, and I'll just bring that guy. Where'd you go? There you go. You. Go sit over here. A lot of the big highlights come around Arc, which is Microsoft's new offering for allowing you to take the Azure technology stack and use it where you're at. So what does that mean? So many people may have some level of infrastructure already built up in, say, Amazon's AWS, Google Cloud, etc. But they might want to start leveraging some of the Azure features. Azure tends to have a lot of really nice management utilities, and this lets you start to do that integration and sort of get that nice hybrid approach. It can even work with on-premise stuff. They had a really cool demo just showing bringing a local HP server rack online right there. And again, demo level stuff, but the demos looked really cool. So if that's the type of stuff that you are interested in, and you've always wanted to have sort of that nice Azure level management stuff, but you had infrastructure or whatnot sitting in a different cloud, and that's where you were having to work, this is definitely something that's worth looking at. The other big one, Azure Synapse. You can think of this as being able to go through and pull out information from big data, being able to do those types of queries where you're ingesting all of this data, it's being stored somewhere, maybe in Azure Data Factory, Data Lake, that kind of thing, and you're looking to figure out how can I get more information about my users, how can I drive this, and the sheer performance that they demoed here was absolutely amazing. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I want to say I believe they demoed it with 10,000 concurrent queries being run, and it didn't break a sweat, and it was awesome to see. And yeah, just the sheer performance of this looks amazing. Again, all of this stuff is new. I haven't had a lot of chance to play with it, so I'm going entirely based upon what I saw demoed and announced. So that's sort of where this is at. We'll come back to some of the developer breakout stuff. There's a whole lot of stuff around AI and machine learning. There's a lot of stuff that they announced around like the bot framework and Power Apps. So if you want to be able to build, like how a lot of websites have those customer service help bots type things, they had some really cool demos showing off being able to basically build those things out, even if you don't have a lot of developer knowledge. This was a lot of just really plugging the pieces together in Azure. A lot of kind of WYSIWYG, drag, drop type interactions, set it up. But even with that, it's really tempting to see, even with some of like the Azure Logic apps where it's very GUI driven, you can click and drag and hook things up and see how that works. It's tempting to write those things off as like little gimmicky apps that, there's no way these will work at enterprise scale. No, they actually do work really well at enterprise scale. Just because they have a fancy, pretty editor that doesn't require a lot of technical brilliance to work, doesn't make them any less powerful or any less configurable. Typically on most of this stuff, you can dive down to whatever tech level you want to get to, and if you want full control and start writing stuff, great. Otherwise, you can go through and do it. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. Again, I'm not gonna try to dive through all of these. At least this is some of the kind of the high level Azure level announcements that they went through and did. The other one that I wanted to show off, because I mentioned it a minute ago, just the sheer count. So if you go through and open up sessions, right, and you look, it'll take you here, and you can scroll down, and I want you to note something. The sheer number of sessions that there are for Microsoft Ignite. That is a lot. There is a ton of stuff here and a ton of information. My naiveness thinking that I could, get through even a small chunk of this was laughably bad. It's going to take me weeks to even just go through all of the sessions and stuff that interest me. But with that said, there is some really cool stuff. So because you are watching my stream, I'm guessing that you're probably interested in potentially WPF type stuff. So we'll go through here because this is at least a more manageable set of stuff. It's like, okay, I get down to WPF, and this brings me forward to, okay, how can I bring my app forward? A lot of the WPF sessions from Ignite center on how do I take my app and bring it forward to .NET Core, or even answering the question of should I bring it forward to .NET Core? And the answer is not necessarily always. It really depends on what benefits you're looking to gain from .NET Core, and if those are worth it. If you've got an app that you're just basically maintaining and doing little bug fixes in, it may not be worth converting over to .NET Core, especially if you aren't going to take advantage of any of that stuff. So for people with existing apps, you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons. For new app development, pick .NET Core every time. Right? All of the new cool new stuff is coming into .NET Core. So unless you have something that's forcing you to go back to framework, some unusual dependency that you can't change, I would highly recommend going to Core for everything, because just about everything supports it. So again, with that said, if you're interested in diving in more to this stuff, there is the Microsoft Ignite page. That's just microsoft.com/ignite, and then go to the sessions, and then come down here, and you can start diving through all of the useful stuff. Again, there is a ton of sessions here, and a lot of information. The other place you can go, especially if you're looking to sort of, if you're a little confused, it's like, wow, nearly 2,000 sessions. This is overwhelming. Where do I start? That kind of thing. There is a nice setup that they've done already with .net/videos, right? Yeah, .net with periods in it. That's always a fun one to try to verbally communicate. But there is all of this great content that a bunch of the Microsoft people have put together to try and give you sort of primers or bring you up to speed on various .NET topics. This is largely powered by a lot of the Microsoft Learn content. So this is a wonderful area to take advantage of. So other fun announcements that they did, there was a lot of announcements around productivity stuff for the Office, for Microsoft Teams. Let's see. So there was stuff for being able to, pop your chat windows out, kind of some of those what I would have considered basic level productivity features that have been sheer annoyances. A lot of those look to be fixed and or getting fixed in the near future. There is a lot of integration that they showed off with being able to link Teams into like your Outlook, to be able to do like take advantage of the Microsoft Graph. So, two people can collaborate, be editing the same document. One's in a Teams room, one's just got their email open in Outlook. They're both editing something, and you see a graph update in real time. All those kind of cool level collaboration type demos. So lots of cool stuff there. Trying to think of what else. So the other one that really excited me. So Visual Studio Code is an Electron app. It is by far my lightweight code editor / text editor of choice, because you can pull plugins in for it. It works with, I think, every language under the sun, and then probably a few extras. So very powerful, but it's an Electron app, runs cross-platform. You can get it on Mac, Linux, Windows, and they all just kind of work. But what they've done is they've taken that one step further and said, okay, getting a developer's environment set up, getting the IDE configured, all of that kind of stuff is time-consuming and difficult. Wouldn't it be great if we could just do that on demand? It's like, yes, that would be wonderful. Yes, please. So that is what they've done. You can go and sign up for this right now. It is online.visualstudio.com. And once you walk through the sign up process, it'll bring you into a place here. I've got an environment set up here. You'll need to set it up and create a plan. So specifically, these plans want to be linked to an Azure subscription, because these things are going to start Azure resources to be able to do this. So just be aware of that. But if you don't have an Azure account, you can sign up for a free one. I don't remember exactly what the benefits are for the free accounts, but at least for the first 12 months, you get, I think it's like $100 a month of Azure resources, and these things can be cheapish. Everything depends on usage, but you will need to set up a plan. For people with MSDN subscriptions, you should already have an Azure account, and if you haven't, activate it. But so once you get this guy tied into your Azure account, I set mine up in West US 2 because geographically that's closest to me. And then you can go through and create an environment. So an environment is going to be set up basically for, you can imagine this as my working setup for a project that I'm on, right? So in this case, you can point it to a Git repository, give it a name, and then it's worth noting that right now, you're kind of limited on what you can debug and run in here. Pretty much anything that runs cross-plat that you might have been building or doing in VS Code previously should be supported. All right. So, but you'll notice the the instance type that you're spinning up is Linux VMs. So just be aware, if you're expecting to do WPF development, I can't confirm this, but when I tried to do something fancy with that earlier, no worky, which sort of makes sense based on the fact that this is really expected to be maybe web type development, .NET Core, ASP.NET Core, scripting type level stuff, that kind of thing. So expect that you could stand one of these things up in the cloud. And then more importantly, it's got this awesome little feature. Like if you were to go through and create these VMs, stand them up, there's a common problem where in Azure you stood up a VM, you forgot to bring down a resource, you could log in the next day and you notice your credits have just something has been eating them up all night. Well, this wonderful little guy will go through and suspend your environment after a certain amount of inactivity. So I've got mine set low just to try to keep it from going, but you can have this thing automatically basically shut itself down. So let's take a look at what it ends up doing. So I've got one here that I already set up. I pointed it at this Git repo. It's a very simple project. This is a .NET Core command line application. You've actually seen it running if you watch any of my streams. When I first start up and it says stream starting in X period of time, that's this little app running. Basically all it does is watch the current clock and update a file. So it's not real fancy, but it lets me go through and get that fancy little setup going. So we've got that guy going, and then it logs me in and away we go. And we'll see how well this guy gets going. That's not where we want to be. There we go. That's what I get for clicking on things. Okay, so loading. I had this loaded earlier, and then it's been more than 5 minutes, so it did what it was supposed to and shut down. So it will walk you through the basic setups of creating like a launch profile and that kind of thing. So for people who have done work with .NET Core in VS Code, this should feel very familiar to you. You've got your terminal, your debug. So let's see here. So let's cd in here, and we can do .NET Run. Now let's just go and look at this real quick. So running countdown, and it's going to output a file path. It's got this is using a NuGet package from System Command Line called Dragonfruit to give me a strongly typed main method. So it automatically generates command line arguments from all of this stuff. But you'll notice when I did .NET Run, running countdown to empty countdown time because it was given nothing, so it defaulted to null. And then it picked up the path for output file path, and away we go. And we have a running application in the web, and I didn't have to do any setup on my own local machine. I don't have to worry about pulling down NuGet packages. I don't have to worry about npm installs. All of that stuff just gets magically handled for me up in the cloud. I can do my editing and debugging here, and it all just works. It's got access to all of the Visual Studio Code features here. So what do we got here? So extensions, for example, if you want, say PowerShell, you can go through, grab the PowerShell, hit install, and next thing you know, we've got PowerShell right into our environment. It's got to relaunch because just like VS Code relaunches after you install an extension, same thing here. But it reloads, pulls it in, and away you go. And you now have a more powerful web-based VS Code instance for your repo. So this is probably quickly going to become my tool of choice for dealing with Git repos online, especially when I don't want to pull down dependencies or set up my machine to be configured correctly, because it is always obnoxious when you realize, oh shoot, to compile this project I don't have the right tool chain installed. I got to open up the Visual Studio installer and load in the right workload, or I've got to pull down this dependency or that dependency. That gets obnoxious quick. This is awesome. Absolutely awesome. And the fact that it was so easy to get set up and running made me very, very happy. So it definitely, there are times where it feels a little new, and some of it could just be my lack of really advanced debugging in VS Code. I tend to use it more as a lightweight editor rather than a full IDE, and so I think I just need to up my Visual Studio Code game and see what this can do. So again, I think this is amazing. The fact that it even ties in with Git source control and everything here is awesome. The one thing I did notice, I ended up having to change my CS proj. This app was targeting 2.2. At least down here when I run, if I can type, .NET -- version, it looks like it comes with 2.1 setup, but I did notice that it's possible. Let's just bounce back here. On your environment, you can go through and launch it with the preview version. So to open in VS Code Insiders. So I'm not entirely, well, let's just click. So this tries to open up locally in my VS Code instance. Don't know why that button says accept. So this gives me access to a local ones. Interesting. Even cooler. Or I can manually just hit the suspend button and put the thing to sleep right away. So, but as far as being able to stand up an environment in the cloud and get it running, this was one of the announcements that really got me excited very quickly. So, let's carry on here real quick because I have so much cool stuff, So one of the other things, and let me find, I meant to have this blog post up already. There is WinUI 3. So this is sort of the let's see, and I will drop the link for this in the chat as well. So this is another one of those new features that's coming down the pipe. So it is worth mentioning right away. This is an alpha. This is not something you should go and build an app in today. It's something you should play with, and the Microsoft team would really love feedback. In fact, just to get the downloader for the VisX, to get this thing running, they do ask that you fill out a survey. That's the only requirement to actually download the alpha, is give Microsoft some feedback on who you are and what types of apps you build and where you think you might use this, because getting that kind of information is very valuable to them. So that is the low cost of what it takes to download WinUI 3 right now. But what is WinUI 3? So right now you've got sort of this separation between UWP application, the Universal Windows Platform, and WPF application. Right? WPF applications can either target .NET Core 3 or full framework. They tend to be these larger ones, but the UWP application has a lot of the newer advancements that Microsoft is putting in. So a lot of the GUI stuff, like the material layout that you see all over Windows 10 and in various apps, that's coming from UWP applications. There's sort of this area where you want to take advantage of the newer features in UWP while inside of your WPF application. And previously what you had was XAML islands, which let you sort of pull in that content and make use of it. But what they're trying to do is consolidate that even further, because that still isn't. That's really sort of an interop type solution of being able to pull in those features. And WinUI 3 aims to take that a step further. So there was another thing called WinUI 2 that came before 3. But WinUI 2 was really just around controls and themes for UWP applications. To use it inside of WPF, you had to go through the XAML islands. It was doable, not quite as great. WinUI 3 is not just controls and styling. This is actually a GUI rendering framework that you can build on top of that sort of aims to bring things together is the best way I can describe it. To be able to actually go through and build out your apps. So if you are considering building a new app and you want to play around with something, the latest and greatest stuff, this is worth giving a try. Again, this is an alpha. I've downloaded it. I haven't even gotten to running it yet. So be aware, it looks really cool. It looks to be a really great way of trying to modernize WPF applications and take advantage of all of the benefits and perks that UWP apps benefit from. And I'm really looking forward to giving it a try. So, but again, alpha, and yeah, links in the chat for anybody who wants to see it. Again, these are one of those things that if people are interested in knowing more, I am happy to do more streaming on this, and we can muddle through it together and see where that leads. So I think, is that enough Microsoft Ignite stuff? There was a lot of stuff there. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that caught my eye over the last few days. We're just boiling through all of this. I was unfortunately not able to go through as many of the sessions as I wanted to ahead of time. Like I said, it's going to take me weeks to get through this. But it is awesome. So I think I'll call it there for the Microsoft Ignite stuff. And one second, I'm just realizing the baby monitor that I was supposed to be manning is powered off and not doing what it's supposed to. So that's not a good thing. We'll see if we can fix that real quick. Okay. So, going back to something that looks like, let's see, close. And let me pull you up, GitHub. So, back to material design in XAML and where we are going here. So, there was a question that came through the Gitter chat probably last week at some point around the dialog host and how to properly use it, specifically wanting to swap out the content. So I started thinking about it and came to the conclusion that a reasonable example for this might be when you are working with like a login screen. So, maybe the users are forced to log into an application, but then there's, the create account button. And so that login screen switches and then becomes the, create new account screen and then moves forward. So that was where I started with the example. And so up here, there is I'm going to grab the link. So here is, for anyone who hasn't seen it, this is a GitHub repo where I loaded up with examples. This largely comes from when somebody asks me a question and I think it would be easiest to show code for it. This is where I put it. So let's see, profile 1, make things bigger. Okay, so if you haven't checked it out, there's also a link to this repo in the material design README. But that was the question with the dialog host that I was going to want to go through and do. So I started up this new dialog host changing content project, right? So let's fire this guy up and we'll see what it's doing. So this is targeting .NET Core 3, but there's nothing in here that is .NET Core specific. It could just as easily be targeting .NET Framework. It does mean that I am on preview builds of material design in XAML. So I'm on a 3.0 nightly builds. And right now, this code behind button is the only one that's hooked up. So we click the code behind button, and it pulls up something that looks kind of like a login screen, right? So you've got your username, a password, a login button, a cancel, and then something that says, click here to create a new account. You click it, it brings you into here. You've got, username, password, re-enter password, create account, cancel. So it's worth noting none of these buttons are actually hooked up to logic right now, right? These ones are basically just set up to close the dialog. There are other examples in here about closing dialogues, getting return values, that kind of thing. I try to keep these examples as isolated and focused on one specific problem as I can. And so in this case, we're going to focus on changing this content out. I'm also noticing that this guy here is, click here to create a new account, and it's cropped. So let's just jump in here real quick. Why is that getting cropped? So that is login control. Oh, probably because my width is hard-coded. How about min width rather than width? Let's do the same thing over here. That way it's allowed to scale in size. Hey, look at that. Now we aren't clipping our T. See? Now I have the whole button. Yay. So, okay, so that gets us into there. That works there. We've got a back button. I kind of want to change out the way this back button is being done. Might do that real quick. And then I'm looking to go through and do the MVVM example, because there's sort of very different approaches when it comes to dealing with swapping the content. And this is sort of a fundamental architecture thing. Some people really like MVVM, and I would say it's probably the dominant view for people doing WPF applications. My personal opinion is it is a significant learning curve, and it's well worth doing. Most of the features in WPF are built around the idea of bindings and templates and that kind of thing. And it really lends itself well to an MVVM style and layout. Now, with that said, it is a learning curve. It adds a lot of complexity, but again, I think it is worth it. Other people prefer the straight-up code behind, which basically says, I don't want any fancy bindings. I want to just write C# code. I want to wire up to my click button handlers, and I want stuff to go when I do it. Sure, you can build it either way, and you can find some happy median in the middle if you want. I think if you get right in the middle, it gets a little obnoxious to read because then you're confused, but whatever. Pick what makes you happy. Or I should say, pick whatever you can be productive with. That's probably a better choice. Let's see. So the create account control. So right here, this thing up here is the back button, and this is what's making me a little less happy. Mostly because this is a stack panel with a mouse down handler and a hand and that kind of thing. So it's one thing that's worth noting with material design. This whole concept of a cursor really doesn't exist, right? It was built for Android, and the idea of changing a cursor makes the big sweeping assumption that there is a cursor, which isn't really true in a lot of touch-based environments. So even on Windows, if you're running on a touch-based machine, things that rely on changing the cursor or hover type effects are pretty much meaningless when it comes to touch. So the way material design handles it is, rather than dealing with sort of the hover effects, they try to give feedback when things occur. So like when you tap on something, you'll see that ripple effect where it kind of bubbles out from wherever your click point was, which you get with the material design buttons. There's a built-in ripple control that handles that for you. So that's the better way of handling it, and I did this late at night, and the next morning I realized that was dumb and made a mental note to come back and fix it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab this real quick, because I want to use one of the, let's see, that was the create account control. I want to use one of the optional button styles. So this is documented in the wiki. And actually, I'm going to grab, I'll put this in real quick, and then we'll go back and explain it. So let's see, resource dictionary, merge dictionaries, paste, and then I just know that by convention I can change this to button and it works, right? And the squiggly lines are because I'm debugging, and you can only make so many choices. Changes. Wow, that was a lot harder than it needed to be. Okay, so if you go to that will drop you onto my blog, which right now when I write blogs, I'm just publishing them on my company's website because they have a blog and they like it when we write content. And so I like writing content, and so when I can do it, I do so. So The one in question here is this 5 steps to getting started with material design in XAML. And specifically, it says 5 steps, but really there's 4. So, there's 1, 2, 3, do all the stuff, set up the defaults, and then there's 5. So this is beyond the default styles. So in this case, if we just do the normal button, we get sort of that colored button like what you saw for the create and cancel buttons. But for this back button, we don't want it to be that nice brightly colored. We want it to be more of a flat button style. So Mountain Dew first. Mountain Dew is important. To be able to use the alternate styles for a control, you have to bring in the resource dictionary that contains those styles. So inside of the material design library, it basically means this big long string here, and you just swap out this last part for the name of the control. So button, checkbox, text box, etc. So whatever control you're looking for, you can just put that name right here, and it'll get it. So because you ended up having to set this dictionary in your app.xaml for the default control styles, if you want one of the optional ones, you just change this default into, control name here. And away you go. So specifically what I'm looking for is I want a button, and I want style, and I want static resource, I want material design. Where's my IntelliSense? Come on, guys. Where's my IntelliSense? Not helpful. I'm going to go grab the demo app. Let's see here. So for anybody who's looking for it, let's see, material design toolkit. So from the releases page on the GitHub repo, you can go and download the demo application and fire it up. And for anybody who's ever curious about, what's all in this library, sort of what's in the box, what do I get to use, this is usually the easiest place to do it. I try to make sure that we've got at least one example of anything cool in the library. But more importantly, what I am after is our flat button style, which I believe is this one here. That's outline button. This one. This is what I want. So you click this little XAML icon in the corner, and it says, here is the magical stuff that you need. It's like, why, thank you. This is exactly what I want. Poof. And you go and paste it into your app, and away you go. It is worth noting, in the demo app, it doesn't show you this any secondary resource dictionaries that it needs. So you sort of have to divine that because this is on a button, that this needs it. I have thoughts about going through and trying to figure out a nice way of displaying that so that when you click this button that it shows you kind of up at the top of, hey, you need the following resource dictionary merged in, and click here to copy and paste, that kind of thing, but have not gotten there yet. Okay, so this guy here, I'm going to take my stack panel, I'm going to just drop it right inside the button. I'm going to turn off that, don't want a cursor set. Don't really think I need the margin either. There. Basically, just doing this so that I can get the so new event handler, great, and take me to it. And let's see. Let's just refactor this. So Control RR to get to the refactor menu. I'm going to just rename this to back, just so it's a little more clear. And then this is the magical code behind stuff for being able to change it. So if you are working in the code behind, or you're in a state where you've got a direct reference to your dialog host, so in this case we do, I've got it right here, I passed it in. So this control has a direct reference to the dialog host. So you can grab the current session off the dialog host, and then this dialog session object has a method on it for update content. So if you want to just swap out content that's sitting inside of an already existing or an already open dialog host, this is how you do it. It's worth noting you can't just call show multiple times and expect that to work. So if there's an existing session, meaning there's a dialog presented, and you want to change its content, you need to call update content. Okay, so let's fire that up. This should hopefully look a lot better, and then we'll go do the MVVM side. I might even get hugely motivated and switch this over to I want to do an example of one of these projects doing multi-targeting, because you can actually compile your app for both WPF and .NET Core. And then I guess the demo app in the main repo shows it. It just feels like that's... I hate using the demo app as an example of how to do coding things, because the demo app is really designed to show the breadth of what's possible in the library, not necessarily best practices, because in a real app, you should not use all the coding styles, which the demo app does use all the coding styles because it's trying to show you everything that's possible. So buyer beware. If you're copying code out of the demo app, just be aware that I would not build an app like that in general, because again, it's designed to show you everything that's possible, not necessarily best practices. So like this one here, we're going to end up doing two different things. I would not build an app with both code behind and the MVVM, and I would probably tend to favor one over the other. So okay, so code behind up, new account option. That's not bad, aside from I want that thing aligned better. So it's let's see, horizontal alignment, left. That's better. Kind of want to offset this guy up a little bit, because this guy, so this padding here is what's ultimately bringing the thing all the way in. And I kind of want this thing to sit up and outside of it. So let's do maybe there, something like that. That looks a little nicer. So yeah, it is worth noting, margins and paddings can technically have negative values. It is just worth being aware that sometimes this can cause clipping depending on how you use them, because just, shifting something left or up doesn't always work. Let's see here. Is that... Seems fine. Yeah, that seems fine. And then the back button takes us back. Great. Okay, so let's, real quick, everybody's favorite Git tool, Git Kraken. Welcome back, Git Kraken. I did run into an issue with it, with Git Kraken the other week. I think it was last week. And I contacted their support because I was having an issue where my Git interactions were taking like a minute to do a commit. They walked me through some kind of debugging steps to try stuff, and ultimately what ended up fixing the problem is whacking my local clone and recloning the repo. So we tried various Git commands for cleanup and garbage collection and that kind of thing, and nothing seemed to fix it. But I'm guessing it must have been something, because a lot of times like I'll have Visual Studio or something interacting with the same repo. So just be aware. If you're running Git Kraken and you get slow, try a fresh clone. Your life might get happier. Okay, so fixed up code behind example. Great. Sounds wonderful. Okay, so let's do an MVVM style one. So I want to end up with, and I'm thinking what I'm going to do here is just start namespacing some of this stuff off, because I want, let's see, stop debugging. Because I want it to be really obvious, since I'm putting multiple styles into the same project, which goes with which. Obviously on like the main window that's going to be a little harder, but let's see, code behind, and let's see, new folder, MVVM. Okay, so these two guys here go into the code behind bucket. Yep, move them. Thanks. And I think, let's see here. I think if I go into the code behind and do the rename on the, I think if I let move contents to namespace, that's not what I want. I want to change the namespace. Let's see, dot code behind. Nope. Dot. You're gonna make me go. You're gonna make me go and change this in both places. You are, aren't you? You jerk. Okay, fine. I'll change it. So that goes there. Let's see. We'll change this guy here. It's probably gonna go and break everything else, but that's okay. And then back in main window. Let's see here. That's probably fine. So it's just the code behind. It probably needs to be updated for this because this guy's namespace now relocated. So add that for me, please. And then let's see, Control R. Nope. Control RG to clean up my extra using statements, and away we go. Okay. So that gets us there. So let's go back on. So for MVVM, there's a couple pieces that are worth noting. So first and foremost is we need a view model. And in this case, I'm going to separate out my login dialog from my create account dialog. There are many ways you could go about doing this. It is very possible that you have a single view model and you just change a state flag or whatnot. For the purposes of showing two separate things, I'm going to separate them. So let's see. So login view model. And by convention, I usually try to end my view model class names with the words view model. So we'll just do that, and then let's see. Public class create account view model. All right, and then move you to your own file, please. Okay, so then back on our main window, we want to implement this button here, the MVVM one. So we're just going to grab and register up a click, new event handler. And I'm wondering if maybe I should do this. Maybe I shouldn't do this with a click handler. Maybe I should. Let's do this with a view model as well. So let's do this. And this is where it's going to get weird because I'm going to have this main window in a state where I'm both using the view model as well as the code behind for both. And again, I would not recommend building an app this way. This is just for the purposes of showing MVVM versus code behind and how you would structure it for this. So let's go back here, add new class, main window, view model. Great, that sounds fine. Okay, so class. Now, for doing these up, trying to decide if I implement a basic view model class or if I pull in something like MVVM Lite. I'm not sure which is which. So for people who are interested in knowing more about it, and this might be the way we do it. This is sort of the blog post that I tend to point people to for people who are just sort of getting started and trying to figure out, should I do MVVM? Should I do code behind? What to learn? This is basically, I'm not really going to go into it. There's also another stream that I've done out on my YouTube channel for people who are interested in that. So if you search for simply budget on, let's see here, it's that. But basically what we're looking to do is build out this. Let's just implement our own real quick. Isn't there a nice little copy button? Oh, whatever. I just want all of this text. Copy. Give me a view model base. That'll work. Didn't really want the line numbers, but thanks. Let's see. Auto format, and then let's just start moving you around. Move you to your own file. And we'll just go through and implement this real quick. So the short version is for MVVM, in general, you usually end up with some sort of base class for your view models. Because this sort of logic that you end up needing for all of your interaction usually follows this exact same pattern. The other thing that is unfortunately not in the box is a built-in command implementation. So we are just going to grab this one, because this will do. Paste. Should look around for that copy button, because this will serve our purposes nicely. Because rather than click handlers in MVVM, the way the view classes, like your user controls, tell you that something should happen is through the commands. That's the primary mechanism. So when a button is clicked, it invokes a command on your view model and says, hey, I was clicked, please go do action, log in or whatever. All right, so we're going to just move this out. So move type to delegate command. Great. So got a little bit of a base. I should probably put these in some shared project. I know I've got a shared thing down here at some point for utilities. Should look at doing that at some point. Anyway, normally my weapon of choice for this in a lot of cases is MVVM Lite. They have a view model based class with a member on it that looks almost identical to this. Same with, they don't call it delegate command, they call it relay command, but it's basically very similar. They use fancy weak references rather than strong references, but unless you actually care about the subtle differences there, functionally, you use them the same way. Okay, so we've got that. So main window view model. So we're going to do a public I command show login dialog, right? Boom, boom, something like that. And we will implement it. And in our constructor, we will go show login dialog, its new delegate command. And then I usually, just for naming conventions, I usually name my execution methods the command name prefixed with the word on. So that's just my own preference, but that's the way I like to do it. So poof. So we are not going to pass a parameter, so we're just going to drop that guy right there. Just by convention, underscore typically denotes an ignored value. It is technically a valid identifier in C#. There are some cases where this actually does hint to the compiler, please drop this out and ignore it. But in this case, it's just going to be a parameter with the name of underscore. Okay, so let's see. Oh, I can't do that, can I? Material design themes, WPF, dialog host, show. All right. Okay. So there's going to be a couple things here. So async void, and then await, and then we're going to do new login view model. Boom, something like that, right? So a couple things that are worth noting here right away with the MVVM pattern. So async void in C# is typically to be avoided almost always. The exception to the rule is when you have, say, an event handler, like on a button click. You'll note over here, this guy is also async void. Because this is effectively a top-level method, top level meaning we don't call this method ourselves, the framework calls it for us when something occurs. Those methods are allowed to be async void, okay? Because if you change them to be async task, the framework isn't looking for a method with that signature. It's looking for a method with void return. So in this case, we have to make it async void. But aside from these top-level handlers, do not ever use it. It will bite you over and over and over and give you all kinds of confusing bugs to chase. But I make the case that an execution method inside of a delegate is effectively a top-level handler, just like a button click, because this is what gets invoked when our button is clicked. So I would like to make the case that this is acceptable. And then you'll note the other interesting difference here. So this show method takes an arbitrary object for its content. Your dialog can be any arbitrary content. In the in this handler here, let's whack this guy, it was passing a user control, and it was just passing that in right there. And I'm going to grab the identifier too, because it's probably worth passing. But it doesn't have to be a user control. If you give it a UI element, it's perfectly happy to say, oh, that's my content, let me display that for you. But in an MVVM pattern, you don't want your view models having to know anything about view objects. You only want them knowing about other view models, services, dependencies, etc. Right? So in that case, for our MVVM pattern, we're just going to use a login view model. And this guy has a dialog host identifier. Oh, interesting. So I don't actually have that. So we're just going to private const. Let's go look up what this is. So you normally don't need to pass an identifier, except in the case where you have more than one dialog host. So dialog host ID. In most of my apps, I tend to have a single dialog host instance, and it lives at the root, and that's it. But if you start ending up with, say, multiple windows, each of them have their own dialog host, you're just calling a static method here, so it needs to figure out which instance or which dialog host you want this displayed on. Because you can imagine if you've got two windows and they each have their own dialog host, and you call this method, it needs to know which one of those to go to. So you differentiate those by an ID. So in general, we're passing the ID in this case. It's not strictly necessary because this app only has one. But if you were to have more than one, you would need to pass this. Otherwise, you will get an exception. Okay, so this gets us going. Let's fire this up and look at what this looks like real quick. Ah, Mountain Dew. Oh, how I love thee. Come on, go, 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 go. Also, happy news. I have ordered an updated computer that will be here sometime next week. So assuming I get time to actually set it up and install everything, I'm going to have a much nicer machine for streaming next week. So fingers crossed, hoping that happens. Okay, so we click our button, and because we didn't bind anything to our command, nothing's going to work. Okay, so that's a whole lot of nada. So let's just go right here, and we're just going to inline this. So window, data context, and then we will do main window view model. Okay. There's a lot of different ways of basically of getting your view model assigned to the data context. I do not like that name. More importantly, why are you... Huh? Did that actually go to the right place? Oh, I've got two main window view models. Oh, well that's unfortunate. Let's get rid of that. I was going to say that namespace looked very, very wrong. So let's turn that off. Turn you off. Go back. Try again. That looks better. Okay, that's what I was confused about. I was expecting to see the MVVM on the end of the namespace, and it was not there. Oh, so there's a lot of different ways of getting your view model into the data context. This is by far the simplest. You directly assign it. The next simplest, I would argue, is right in the code behind in the constructor. You set it right inside of this guy. Those are the two most obvious ways of doing it. With that said, there's other patterns and other ways of doing it. View model locator is a very popular pattern. There's a lot of tricks with if you've got dependency injection set up in your app. to go through and magically marry these things up. Other libraries like Prism or Caliburn Micro have other means of getting those too. But basically, ultimately, you want something in your view that knows about what view model it's being hooked to, right? Because it's okay if the view knows about the view model, not the other way around. The view model should be agnostic of its view. Okay, so we're going to set this up, and so these buttons can have a command, binding, show login dialog. Now let's start it. Now I think when we click this button, it'll actually do something. And I'm realizing I probably should have namespaced this one level deeper. Well, maybe not. This is one of those areas where I'm always torn about, do I structure this the way that I would want somebody to build their app, or do I structure it in the simplest way to get my one point across? Okay, so breakpoints hit from our command. We are now calling show dialog with a login view model. Edits were made. What edits? No edits were made. Okay. You are frustrating me. Okay, just launch without debugging. Just go. I don't want a debugger attached. Okay, so you'll note that now when we show our dialog pops up and it just shows us a single string. Okay? This is one of the most common issues I would say that I see people run into when they are doing MVVM is they're doing something, they're going along, and then all of a sudden they just get a type name displayed to them. So what's happening is we told the dialog to show this view model, and it happily took that view model, shoved it right into the dialog, and then went, I don't know how to display this view model. Type name sounds great. So it basically just does the toString method on the object and says, is this what you wanted? And it's like, no, that's not even close. So we have to do something to tell it how to display this view model, right? So there are a couple ways of doing it. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start, let's see, view. And I'm realizing what I probably should do is move all of my view models down a level. View model. So this is a little closer to how I would structure it in a real app. And usually inside of these things, there's inside of both the view and the view model namespace, there are additional namespaces that are usually segregated off to different areas of the application. So, you know, if your application has logical boundaries, I usually use those to break these up further. So I end up with yet one more layer of nesting. Typically, there's not an MVVM folder in my WPF projects, but there would be a view and a view model namespace. So what we are going to do is we now need to create some views. So step one, we're going to just go through and add a new resource dictionary. And let's call it dialog templates, right? Okay, so we've got dialog templates. So the way we handle this is to tell the GUI how to display our view models, we create a data template, and we do data type and X type, and we're going to do, say, login view model. Not quite what I wanted. Data template. And go look up my data type for me. You gonna be happy and do it for me? Not that happy? Oh, come on. Where's my IntelliSense? Rick Sharper would have done this for me already. Okay, we'll just grab it. It's probably because I've broken other stuff here. Let's see here, and I can fix this real quick. That one. Thanks. So back over here, if we grab this, we do this, MVVM view model. I'm going to just change this to VM because it really is just a view model namespace. So then the data type on this becomes view model login. Okay. So then let's just do some stuff. So text block, text. Hey, this is how you display it. All right. And then, well, let's get fancier. Stack panel. Boom, boom, boom. And then button content, some button. Right? Okay, so now the last thing we need to do, so we've told it how to display the view model now. The last thing we have to do is go through and actually somehow connect this data template back to our view model object. So back here in my main window view model, or my main window, I'm just going to bring in that resource dictionary. So resource dictionary, let's see, and actually, well, no, this is fine. Resource dictionary, merge dictionaries, and then we want it pointed at mine. So let's see, that becomes MVVM. I am really not liking my IntelliSense being dead right now. Dialog templates dot XAML. Can find it. Let's just compile because I'm not actually convinced I'm in a compiling state. In fact, I'm pretty confident I'm broken. So we basically just need to get this data template referenced so that when it goes to look up the data template for the view model, it finds it. So this just needs to be somewhere in the hierarchy when it goes to look, because when this dialog host goes looking for that view model type, it's going to walk up its hierarchy looking for things. So it'll first look at the dialog host resources and say, do I find a data template? No. Okay. Look at my parent, which is the window. Does it have the resource? Ah, yes, I found it in here. Okay. You could also move these things all the way up to the app.xaml if you wanted them resolved at a global level. But be cautious about how many things you put in your app.xaml, because everything in your app.xaml has to be loaded for your app to start. So if you put everything in there, your startup time is going to suffer. So in general, you want to try to keep things top level-ish, but usually that translates to at the root of a window, at the root of a user control. You can technically put them lower down, but usually for simplicity, it's done at the root of the logical element, which tends to be a window or a user control in general. And assuming this thing keeps going, come on, you can do it. We'll see how this goes. So hopefully, if this works, this will now get us actually displaying our dialog, and then we'll just tie it into basically the exact same control that we used for the code behind. That way it... Boy, what are you doing? Why is it taking you so long? That way they end up displaying the same... Oh, that's what I did. Oh, dear heavens. That's what's going on. So I was debugging a build issue earlier and turned my MS build output verbosity through the roof. Don't do that. It slows down your builds. Useful for debugging, bad for performance. So yeah, when not debugging your build, you should leave your output verbosity set to like minimal. Probably not none, but detailed, as you can see, is a lot of lines. A lot of lines. Okay, come on, buddy. Come on. You can do it. Oh, I bet you it's... Oh, boy. I bet you got confused and decided to recompile every project in the solution, which there's only a couple projects in the solution. I think I'm up to like 60, which is probably too many. But whatever. I also have been debating how much I should start converting all these projects over to .NET Core. Because I do realize that if people are trying to use these examples in older projects, they might not have the .NET Core stuff installed, making these examples a little worse, etc., etc. So I've sort of resolved myself to the idea of could not copy. Oh, all that effort because launch. Trust me, you can copy now. So I've sort of resolved myself to the idea that maybe the new projects I create in here going forward I might do as .NET Core and leave all the old ones as framework. That way there's examples of framework for people who want to see it. Maybe. If people have strong opinions, I'm open to hearing them. Okay, so now we launch MVVM. Huzzah! And you'll note this is now our data template that we defined, which is great. So now we have a way of declaring effectively the view for our dialog as part of these data templates. So what I am going to do is I'm going to just blatantly copy both of these guys over because I basically want this exact same control, right? With only mild changes to it. So this is going to become, let's see, MVVM view. Copy that. Come over here, change you, and we're going to do the same thing on the create, so that goes there. All right, so rather than that, we go there. Okay, great, perfect. Everyone's happy. So I hope everyone's happy. Let's see, MVVM light. What are you unhappy about? Was not found. Oh, probably because I'm still debugging. Yeah, that's probably a problem. Okay, so for our login control, and let's just build this guy real quick to make sure it's not anything. There we go. Squiggly lines go away. Okay, so mostly we just want this template, but we want to change up the way this button works here because this is using a click handler and MVVM. We want to switch it. So what we're going to do is we are going to first start with our data templates. So rather than this as our template, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to map this to, say, the login control. Right? And it should add local poof. So now the view for this view model, when this view model shows up, it's going to just map this into this control. And it's going to set the data context for the control to the view model for me. Which is great. So now back over here. Okay, so we need to add over on our login view model. So if we wanted, we could do some bindable properties for like the username and password. So public string username. And this is going to be backed. Actually, let's do this. Get set, auto property it, and then convert to full property. Great, thank you. This guy will derive from our view model base, and then we just change this property into something that raises iNotify property changed. This becomes set. Ref, boom, boom. Okay. If you have not seen this pattern for doing the properties, what did I call it? It's not called set. It's called set property. Take a look at that blog post that I linked before. Again, the one on getting started with MVVM kind of walks through this pattern and setting up this view model base. But you can sort of imagine doing something like this. So that means then on our login control, this text box, the text here binding username. All right. So now that those will get linked up for me. Okay, so this guy here we want to change up to be a command. And let's think about how we're going to go about doing this. Because ultimately we want to change out the content for the dialog. Trying to decide the easiest way to go about doing this. Well, for starters, let's just do this. Binding show create account. So then on our login view model, we also need a command. I like to put them at the top. Public I command. I already forgot what I named it. Show create account. Great. So we'll set up a command. Go over here and do this guy here. If you are starting a new project and you're using this as a template, use this structure as a guide. I would probably tell you to pull in MVVM Lite for your view model and your command implementation rather than using my very simplistic commands. So that, for what it's worth, that would be my recommendation. Not that they're necessarily wrong, but they're the appropriate full implementation on something like the command has a little bit more to it, and will be a lot easier for you to work with. Again, conceptually they work the same, but there is some nuance in the implementation. So let's see, show create account gets new delegate command on show create account. So generate me a method, please. And once again, we're just going to throw away the parameter. I'm trying to decide the best way to have this guy get all the way back to the dialog host. So there's a couple options here. One is like a publish subscribe model, or a pub sub as a lot of people will call it, where this method just basically publishes a message out and says, hey, I need my dialog content changed. And then maybe the main window or the main window view model switches that out. That would be one option. I'm wondering if maybe changing this guy out might be cleaner. So, well, this guy is going to be the one who gets a hold of it. So let's just pass the dialog session into this guy. I think that's probably the easiest way to do it. So on the show method, there are overloads here around the opening and closing event handlers. Let's see. So closing event handler, opening event handler. This is the one I want. So don't remember the exact signature of this. So let's dive in and look. Yep, thanks. Go. I want to say it takes two parameters, and I want to say it's something like sender and object. So this delegate is what I'm interested in. Sender args. Got it. Great. So in this case, we're going to do sender args, and we're just going to lambda body this guy and be done with it. Poof. Okay. This guy's probably unhappy because he probably can't figure out which one we want. So new dialog opening event handler. Normally you don't have to declare the type explicitly and it'll figure it out, but in this case there is What are you unhappy about? In this case, there's two overloads of this show method. One that takes the opening and one that takes the closing. And I don't think it knows opened, not opening. Opened. Paste. Cheater mode. Boom. Using statement. Away we go. Okay, so now it should be happy and be able to figure this out. But let's break the var view model gets new login view model. We'll just pull you out into a local so we can reference you view model. And then view model dialog session maybe gets e dot, oh, not e, args. It's important to use the right name, and that guy will have the session on him as well. So let's just, there's a lot of ways to go about doing this. The short version is you either need to get a hold, you need to get a hold of the dialog session. The easiest ways to do it are either with one of these callbacks from the show method, or if you've got something that has a direct reference to the dialog host instance, you can just pull it off the property on there. So either one, but regardless, you need to get a hold of this dialog session. So lots of ways to skin a cat, but we're going to go with this. So yeah, sure, fine. I'm going to take off the internal set. We're just going to do get sets. And come up here and do this. So on this guy here, when this command is invoked, we will do dialog session, and it could be null. Like that is an option here. So update content, new create account view model. Boom, boom, boom. Something kind of like that. Sure, that'll work. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is back in our templates, we need to give ourselves a data template. Let's see, data template, data type. Let's see, X type in the view model namespace. For my create account view model, I now need, let's see, create account control, something more like that. Why are you unhappy? You just unhappy because you haven't been built yet? You should be fine. That looks like the right namespace. View model namespace, view namespace. We can rename this. Let me rephrase, we gotta wait for the build to finish and then we can rename this. Build succeeded. Okay, so you're just slow. Okay, so this gets us over to here. And let's just fire this up and make sure it works. This will at least get us this far. So it's worth noting, a very obvious critique that I hear a lot is with MVVM is look how much extra code you had to write. Because this is, I've clearly had to set up a lot more code to do this than in the code behind approach. With that said, there are benefits to this. With the view model approach, it keeps a good separation of concerns from your view to your business logic, so that your view model doesn't need to be concerned with like updating button states and changing visibility and that kind of thing. Things just magically stay in sync. Whereas, or I should say with MVVM, things magically stay in sync because of the bindings. Whereas in code behind, you're now in control of everything, and that's up to you to do it. It is also worth noting, too, if you're writing unit tests, user controls and code behind methods are very, very difficult to unit test. So usually you just abandon unit testing them altogether. Whereas a view model then keeps that logic because it's encapsulated and shouldn't know anything about view objects. You can then go through and just use them and unit test them like you would any other C# class. Okay, so we click. the MVVM button and question what it's doing or why it's crashing. Object reference not set to the instance of an object. That's not a good thing. Why? What? Where did you crash? Okay, so did I miss something? This stack trace looks very, very suspect to me. And I have a sinking suspicion it's more likely something maybe here. So a lot of the controls have visual state managers with storyboards that are effectively asynchronous code because they're doing animations and updating properties. So it's very possible that when you get crashes around those, that the crash is more likely something went wrong during this process. This just happened to be the result of it. So there. This pulls the session. Sets it. Exits. Great. Cannot animate is open property. This screams that there's just a straight up bug in the dialog host. But why does it work on the other side but not on the view model side? And more importantly, why did this break now? I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. Let's relaunch this. Something seems very off with this, where this was working and then stopped working with no apparent reason. So let's just fire this up because we didn't change anything about it. What is going on? Why are you unhappy? Why are you unhappy? Fire this guy up. Go, 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 go. Okay, so that makes me feel better. So it's not the callback. It's more likely than our data template. So undo, undo, paste. That means that if it's crashing on launch, it's probably you that it's unhappy about. MVVM view. What are you? Is unable to use it because it is not public or does not define a public parameter constructor. What? I have a sinking suspicion this guy is the cause of my issues. We are in the one that I think I'm in. This appears to match. Turn you off for a moment just to make sure there's nothing. Oh, that's what it is. Haha, found it. Okay, when I copied these guys over, I forgot to update their code behind. And so that error that it was giving me where it said, hey, your control doesn't define a parameterless constructor was pretty much spot on. It did not define a parameterless constructor because these guys were the spitting image of the code behind implementation. So we need to take these guys back down. And this is actually more common of what you'll see in WPF applications that are using MVVM, in that you won't have your code behind files will be almost empty. So let's see, we're going to turn the button click off of this guy for now. Now launch, and let's try this again. So that was a very confusing error for something that should have been simple. And I'm wondering if I'd paid closer attention if there was an inner exception that would have been a little more obvious what the problem was. Because the better exception would have been could not instantiate, login control. And huzzah, we have a login control, and we click this, and huzzah, we have this, and we haven't hooked this button up yet. Okay, well, that at least works, so that's good. So let's go through and wire up this button now. So create account view model. Let's see. So public I command back command. Sure, that sounds great. Autocode button. Let's see. New delegate command on back. And this here is basically going to be exactly the same type of thing that we did on our other view model, only in reverse. So we're going to do this. That goes there. Throw this away. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to change this up just a little bit. And we're going to require this as a dialog session. Dialog session. Auto include, great. Let's see, initialize my property for me and add my null check. I'd rather do this at the end rather than at the beginning. Great. So I don't need this anymore. And then you become a login view model. So the other option, because this is effectively going to create a new login view model, which is fine. We're basically throwing away our login view model when we go to the create account page, and then we'll create a new one when we want to go back. We could persist the instance and pass that in here rather than the dialog session, but meh. Okay, so this guy is going to pick up this guy now needs a dialog session passed to him, which is great. And that should get us a little bit closer. Okay, so fire this guy up. And hopefully this MVVM pattern just now all works like it's supposed to. And then so let's see. So MVVM version comes up, and then create new account. Back. Hey, go back. Oh, did I not bind? I never set the command. That'll do it. So binding back command, and I'm just going to put some new lines there. Poof, now it works. You will notice that I have the magical XAML edit and continue turned on, which makes these types of code changes much nicer. I very much prefer to run my app, make changes to my XAML, and see what those look like in my running app. I don't like the XAML designer because it's the designer is a best guess as to what your app might look like at runtime. I would much rather see what my app does look like at runtime and make my changes there. So cool. So that gives an MVVM version of it. So let's go just commit that real quick. So lots of changes, great. Adding MVVM implementation. Great. So commit. Okay, so the next one that we wanted to do was something with a transition. So let's go up here, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new user control for this, just for the purposes of sanity. User control, please log in with transition. Boom. So inside of the material design XAML library, there is a transitioner control, which basically lets you swap back and forth between views, which is sort of what we want, because right now we're just kind of hard swapping the content in our dialog. Whereas if we do something with a nice transition, you can get that kind of wavy slide in, slide out, move forward, move back type implementation. So transitioner, go resolve, thanks. Okay, and then I think what we just do here is I might need to do a separate namespace, because I think I'm going to want to change out how this control works. Yeah, let's do another namespace. I think I should just separate these out and duplicate. Let's see. Well, wondering if I do the MVVM one first. So let's go here. Where is the transitions? I don't know if this guy shows. Let's see, transitioner, transition slide. There's all this stuff in here, but it's not. Yeah, because you can just embed the user controls straight inside the transitioner and it'll handle it for you, which is wonderful. It's exactly what I want. Now let's just go in here. So let's do this. Class transition view model. Okay. So slap that on there, clean up my usings, and then add a new user control here. Boy, I wish he's going to be so close. This would be almost a duplication of everything. Trying to decide how much I reuse versus how much I transition. Let's do this. Let's see. So let's go here, and we basically are going to want to pick up all of these. Copy, paste. Okay, so we don't need either of you anymore. You're meaningless. Let's see, create account control, and we need to change up your namespace. So you are no longer MVVM view. Hey, transition, right? Grab that. Let's see, view changes to transition, same on the login side. Again, this stuff is basically a copy and paste. Only because I'm trying to show 4 different concepts all in one app. A cleaner approach might be to break out the MVVM and code behind examples into their own apps, but then I end up duplicating creation of projects and yada 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 yada. And yuck. Okay, So we'll do that. I do have a transition view model, so we're going to go up here and we'll do a data template for it. Data template. Let's see, data type. Let's see, X type. Transition view model. Great. Transitioner. Go find it for me, please. Thanks. And then inside of here, I'm going to want the create account control. And this local should be pointed at not the view namespace, but the transition namespace. So it's going to be worth noting that these examples, I suspect, are going to confuse some people. And maybe we should rename local to make this more obvious. Transition. Let's see, so create account control and login control, and the transitioner requires you to tell it its index, which I think we should probably fix at some point, but I believe that's still an issue in the latest version. Okay, so we've got that guy, we've got that guy. So let's get through all of that really quick. And so that gets me into there, that gets me into there, and main window. Let's go back here, or I'm sorry, main window view model. So that's here, here, here. So rather than show login dialog, public I command show transition login dialog. Show transition login dialog on show transition login dialog. And again, the objective here is we want to basically have the same UI that we had before, but rather than just hard swapping the dialog's content, we want that nice swipe forward, swipe back effect as the user goes between the login screen and the create account screen. So this is going to be very similar to this, except for we don't need this dialog session anymore. So that's going away. And we aren't going to do login view model. We're going to do a new transition view model. So part of doing the change here and switching to a different view model is simply so that we've got a different type to key on for the data template. So this guy here is a different dialog template, so we need to include that, just like we did this here. So rather than view, we're going to grab the one in transition as well, and that should get me that template. Okay, so now the last thing we need here is this guy. So I believe, if I remember correctly, transitioner, I thought, let's see, I thought, yeah, so it's got move next, move previous commands, which is exactly what we want. So on the login control, this command changes to transitioner move next command. Let's see, MD. Boom. So that becomes that. So in WPF, the terminology for this is called a routed command. This basically, so unlike a normal command like what we did before, where it pulls the command off of our view model, a routed command goes looking through the visual hierarchy. So in this case, it's going to look for somebody who's going to handle these transitioner commands. So because these user controls are stored inside of the transitioner, when it walks up the view hierarchy and gets to the transitioner control will go, oh, I know how to handle that command. Let me go and do the right thing for you. So it's a way of letting your child control be pretty agnostic about the implementation of the command and just say what it wants to happen and then trust that somebody else will handle it and do it. Move previous command. So something more akin to this. You'll notice that this is also the way these close commands are working on these like create and cancel buttons. Is these buttons are just saying fire the close dialog command, and I'm going to trust that somewhere higher up in the view that I'm inside of a dialog somewhere and somebody's going to actually handle this command, which because they're in a dialog eventually gets up to the dialog host, which does in fact handle this command. You could put your own handlers on these at a different level and do something different if you wanted. Or if you're just inside of the right control inside of this library, it just works. So I think that now works. And maybe I will ditch the code behind example. I'm not sure if it's worth doing a code behind example for this transitioner stuff, only because the code behind example for this is going to look almost identical to the MVVM one because there's so little data binding here. Though it is worth noting that there's a small issue we need to address with the wrong view model being assigned in each case. So, but this should be enough to show the animations. Hopefully this thing keeps up with the animations so that we can see them. Go. Go. Did I not bind the button on my main window? I did not. That will be a problem. Binding. Show transition login dialog. Let's try that again. There we go. So now if I click here, switches there, and you kind of saw that bubble out animation. Switch back and it shows that animation. So the transitioner has other animations that you can go through and apply to it. This just happens to be the defaults. So if you want kind of that effect, that's how you do it. So the bug that I mentioned. So right now the problem is both of these controls are getting the wrong view model applied to them. So both of these are getting the login control and the create account control both have their view model set to this transition view model, which is not quite right. But these are in a separate namespace, which means you could probably tie them to a different view model. So let's see. To do stuff to support the login control and create account control in the transition namespace. So there's really nothing that needs to be done in the view model to get this behavior. However, what you might want, again, I don't know this for a fact, but say well, here, let's just do it real quick. I'm going to put more stuff, but I'll do a quick example. So public string username, all right, get set. And then we'll do this, and full property, please. Great, 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 great. And this needs to derive from view model base. And then this becomes set property ref value. Okay, all right. So now we have a username property that we can bind to. Let's go here. Let's go here. So this one's being bound to a username. Let's see, text box, text, binding, username. Okay, so what has this gotten us? So because both the login control and the create account control are now sharing the same view model object, which means when one of these text boxes updates the username property in the view model, the other text box is going to update auto-magically for us. So in the situation where somebody may go to sign in and then say perhaps you want to keep that username pre-populated for them so that they don't have to type it again, some username, right? So I click over to here, some username gets pre-populated in here because both of these are pointed to the same view model, which means the same property is backing the text field for both of these text boxes. So this is where the MVVM pattern really starts to shine. When you can start to have this kind of complex logic that would be really obnoxious to implement in the code behind, where you have to watch for text changed and, okay, when this one changes, I update this one and back and forth, and you have to deal with that. With bindings, it all just works and you're done. So this is one of those areas where I think makes the case really well for an MVVM pattern and why you might select it. So I think that is probably clear enough. And I think on this main window one, I'm going to just comment this out for now and leave a comment here. Let me know if anyone wants to see the implementation for this one. Okay, because again, I think, let's see, very similar to the MVVM one. Because again, even though this one's using MVVM, there's the stuff in this transition namespace almost doesn't need a view model at all. It basically functions on its own because of the routed commands. And there's not a lot here. I mean, there is technically this view model with this property that's being used, but there's not that much else that's in here. One kind of side note, I did use a password box inside of this UI. This guy is really obnoxious to bind to. In fact, it is actively made difficult to do data binding with, because the problem with binding to a string property is it's very easy for tools to just go and inspect that and read the value of that string, whereas a password is something that is probably needs to be more secure. So the password box locks down your password into a secure string, not a normal string, which means data binding to it doesn't work, and you have to use code behind techniques to go in and read it out and that kind of thing. So it's a little obnoxious. There's lots of information online about how to work around this problem in various ways. Some people just ditch using the password box and say, I don't care. If something can read the memory of my process, I have a different problem. Okay, that's a solution. You have to evaluate your app to make that determination. Some people go through and do like attached properties on the password box that basically convert between the secure string and a normal string, effectively mitigating the protection that the secure string gives you. Sometimes they do it kind of late bound so that the attack surface is smaller. But yeah, so worth noting about that is the password box doesn't really play that nice in an MVVM environment because of security and needing to handle that. So let's go through. I think we're going to, let's push this stuff up. Go here. So let's see. Stage all changes. Added MVVM transition example. Let's see. Also shows sharing data. Which, again, it's sort of cheating to share data. It's worth, I guess, one other comment I'll make here. So if in the event that you wanted to do that sort of same pass the username back and forth in one of these other examples. So, like, for example, if in the basic MVVM pattern we wanted to pass this username over to here, you have access to it. So maybe I'm on a roll. Let's just keep going. Let's see, public string. Did I lowercase it? I think I lowercased it before. I got to get my templates installed again so that I don't have to keep typing these. I've got code snippets that I've written to generate these properties so I don't have to keep typing them all the time. This is really obnoxious. Let's see. Normally I agree with grouping like members, but for the purposes of bindable properties, I really like having the field right next to the property that it goes with. Okay, so there's that guy there. Oh, so you need to derive from view model base. Okay, so these views each have a separate one. Let's see here. So we're going to go here. And because these are separate view models, these guys need to tell each other about them. So username gets username, and then same thing on the other side. This guy here, we do something like this, something like this. And we do username gets username. And that goes through, and proof is in the pudding. We'll just fire this up. But now on the basic MVVM example, if I type in a username and then switch to the other view, it'll pass it through to the other view model. Oh, did I update? I need to double check. I don't know if I updated the view on the create account side to use that property. Let's look. Oh, yeah, see? Not updated. Let's make sure this one is. This one's updated. Hey, you're my way. You're my way. Hold that thought. Hold on, buddy. Hold on. Come here. So you, magical update. Okay, so if we go in here and fire this guy up, and I go, foo, toggle over. Foo is now populated in here as well. Foo bar, back, foo bar is populated here. So we've got a way of now passing data back and forth between these things. So let's go, and while we're doing it, let's look at the code behind example and do that as well. So we'll handle this one here. So log in with transition. We're going to delete this because that doesn't serve a purpose anymore. These guys though do serve a purpose. So let's see. String username. I'm going to do the same on this side. String username. And this basically follows the exact same pattern as the view model ones, except for now we're going to be in charge of doing it. So let's see. That looks funny, but we're going with it. We're going with it. I'm just saying, giving the X name of username and having it literally line up with the text block's text of username, I see a potential confusion point there. So we will grab the username text box and grab its text property, poof, and pass it through, and then same on this side. So username text property, and let that go through. Okay, so now we should have the same behavior on the code behind side, where except for when you don't do anything with it. So the username text gets username. Again, this is one of those areas where if you're doing code behind, you're in charge of doing all the updates, which means you can mess it up. Whereas a binding just works. As long as you set it in the property, you don't have to think about anything else. Okay. There is no argument. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, this guy wants an initial username. Great. Empty string sounds wonderful. And away we go. The other option here would be to give this login control an overloaded constructor that doesn't take in the string, or even just make the string an optional parameter. Either one would be acceptable, and probably the approach I would go with in a more production-y app. Okay, so same test. foo, create account, switches over, foo's populated, we change it to bar, hit back, foo bar is now set up there. Okay, great. So back to get cracking, one more commit. Let's see here, adding, passing data between the views on all examples. So stage all, commit, and we'll just push that up. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. Again, sometimes I get off on these small examples, but these are always based upon questions that I've either gotten in the Gitter chat or issues that I've seen come up. So hopefully, again, if people find this helpful, I'm very happy to go through and do up these examples and even work through them on the stream for people who have questions who may want to interact. I'll also throw an option out there for people as well. If you have an open source project and you are wanting some help or pair programming or a code review on it, let me know. I would be happy to do that. Especially if somebody is interested in maybe doing a pair programming session on an app you're working on as part of this stream. Shoot me a message on the Gitter chat room. And we can see about scheduling that and going through and doing it, because I'm happy to do it. My only rules would be is let's make sure this is something that's open source and okay to share. So make sure that you actually own the intellectual property. And other than that, I think be happy to go through and do it. It doesn't necessarily have to be WPF, though. That's definitely where my expertise tends to lie. So that would be helpful. So that option's out there. If anybody wants a code review or pairing, and if you want to do it as part of this stream, let me know in the comments or message me on the Gitter chat room. And like I said, happy to try and schedule something and see if it works. So with that, it is about at that 2-hour mark for me. So I think I am probably going to call it here for tonight, since this is a nice wrap-up point. And then we'll do this again next week. If there are topics from Ignite or other technology stacks that people are interested in learning more about, or just kind of having a group learning session, struggle through it together one night, let me know what you're interested in seeing, and I'm happy to go through and do those. So with that, I'm going to say happy